Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for tonight's lecture by the brilliant Dean Spade. My name is Laura Henriksen. I'm the Director of Learning and Community Engagement here at the Poetry Project. And before I turn it over to Dean to guide us in thinking through the romance myth together, I just have a few reminders and updates. Tonight's moderator, the wonderful Anna Kreinberg, is adding a link to the chat now with some helpful Zoom tips and best practices. Please note that we are recording tonight's event. You are welcome to have your cameras on or off as you prefer, but I just invite you to keep in mind that if you have your camera on, it's possible that your little tile will end up in the archived video. I also want to note that it's possible to access a live transcript of tonight's event by clicking that little red live link in the top left corner and selecting View Stream, which will open the transcript in another browser window. If you have any Zoom questions or run into any difficulties, please don't hesitate to reach out to anyone with staff after their name, and we'll be glad to help. So too, and crucially, if you experience or notice any maliciousness in the chat, please reach out to anyone on staff right away so that we can work to get that resolved. We are grateful to you for joining us in our ongoing effort to build and nurture safer spaces where we can listen and learn together. Anna is now adding to the chat a link to our Statement of Safer Spaces. By gathering with us for this event, you are committing to upholding the values described in this statement, and in so doing, joining us in the work of collectively cultivating an environment that challenges and resists ongoing structures of hierarchy and harm. If this event were taking place in our physical venue, we would be gathered together now in St. Mark's Church in the Bowery, where we have hosted events for more than 50 years. St. Mark's Church was built on the site where Peter Stuyvesant constructed his family chapel in 1660. Stuyvesant was once described to me as the original law and order mayor of New York, overseeing continual colonization and enslavement as he increased the population of enslaved Africans in the colony, using their stolen lives and labor to construct the buildings and streets on this stolen land. St. Mark's Church is located on the unceded homeland of the Lenape people, Lenape-Hoking. As we gather across various neighborhoods and nation states, it gives me occasion to remember that it's not just some of the land that was stolen or some of the land that needs to be returned, but all of it. It reminds me too that to return the land is not a matter of transferring capitalist ownership, but as many Indigenous thinkers have taught us, a radical rethinking of ownership and belonging, centering Indigenous autonomy and active relationality and responsibility. To reiterate Gloria Anzaldua's assertion, this land was Lenape-Hoking always, and is, and will be again. Anna is putting a link to a map in the chat now, not to endorse it as complete, but to invite you to join us in learning continually about the land we occupy, its history and ties, as a path towards deeper accountability. Thank you for reflecting on this with me. It is my honor to now introduce Dean Spade. As I eagerly anticipated this talk over the last few weeks, I found my thoughts returning to that persistent icon of romanticism, the great poet, revolutionary, and truly terrible boyfriend, Percy Shelley. I wondered, what if Shelley's circle had included, instead of another truly terrible, perhaps even worse boyfriend, Lord Byron, someone like Dean Spade? A friend who could encourage him to consider the possibility that the way we treat our lovers is part of our movement work, a piece of the world we are trying to build. That instead of accepting jealousy, possessiveness, control, cruelty, indifference is all inevitable consequences of romantic love and sexual life, that there could instead be another, more careful and more liberatory way. Now, if anyone is feeling a desire to defend Byron or Shelley in the chat in this moment, I invite you to rethink that temptation. Yes, they were geniuses in other ways, but no, not in this way. And I think part of what Dean Spade teaches us is that this happens all the time. The romance myth is so pervasive, is so deeply internalized by so many of us, that it appears not just in obviously normative structures, but also in our creative communities, our anti-oppression work, our heroes, our dreams. As such, Rather than judging ourselves and each other for the consequences of this bad fantasy, what if instead we could think together about other ways we could organize our practices, our politics, our daily lives, beyond the structures imposed and enforced by the romance myth? I am so excited to turn it over now to Dean Spade to help us move more deeply into these questions. Dean, whenever you're ready, I turn it over to you. Oh, James, do you need to make Dean a co-host again so that he can unmute himself? One second. Dean, I asked
very
you.
Weird.
Okay, are you coming through? Sorry about that.
No, it's okay. I can't start my video on the one I'm actually trying to use. Let's see if I can start my video on this one, and then I'll just switch if I have to. Can you see me?
Let me see.
Yes, okay. I'm gonna just move things around and open my slideshow on this other computer. It's like no big deal.
Take your time,
Look at that.
take your
Great.
time.
Everything's gonna be wonderful. Okay, I'm just gonna switch these. All right, cool. Sorry about that. Thank you so much for that really kind introduction. I loved the poetry tie-in. Very fun. I'm super glad to be here. I'm joining you all from Duwamish Seattle, Washington, and excited about this event. And I have some slides, so I'm going to see how I can make that work. Oh, great. Thanks for making me co-host on this one. Great. I want to just tell you that when I made this, ooh, things are happening. When I made this slideshow, it was the first slideshow I ever made in Google Slides, and I got really excited about all the like colors, and it's very loud and tacky. I hope you enjoy it. It's like we're in a Valentine's Day card in like the worst ways. Okay. So my first thought is it would be great if people are willing to introduce themselves in the chat, just so we know who's here. So if people are willing to just say in the chat your name, where you're calling in from, if you feel up to it, no pressure if you don't. Relatedly, I want to encourage people to take care of themselves during this event. It's totally fine to just take breaks or leave. It's so great that they're recording it, so there's no need to feel like you need to watch it if it's not working for you. Also, I'm going to have us participating in the chat. But if you don't feel like reading the chat because it's like not good for your eyes or it's not working for you, you could just listen. I won't say everything that gets written in the chat because there's too much stuff, but I'll say some things that get written in the chat so that you'll have the opportunity to kind of follow along, even if you don't want to read the chat. Okay, I'm just dealing with my little logistics problems, like how to have a mouse that works, given that I've changed everything around. Okay, oh, everything's happening. Okay, let's see if I can get us backwards. Okay, great. Also, I wanted to name that the romance myth has been used to justify hurting people a lot. And that's, part of why we're having the conversation. And so it's possible that the content that we talk about tonight could bring stuff up for people, like people might have said these kinds of messages to you while they hurt you or someone you loved. That's very likely. And so I just want to say again, it's okay to leave. It's okay to take a break. It's not weird if that's happening for you. In the chat, I'm curious, people, are we willing to name any ways that you think you might take care of yourself tonight if things get stirred up for you in this event? And I'll read a few of these out loud. How do you take care of yourself when you're going to some thing where things might get stirred up? Jay says physical movement, stretching. Mo is going to cuddle their cat. Holding cats, drinking tea, deep breathing. Love it. Calling friends, stepping outside for fresh air, being with a friend, texting friends, using a weighted blanket. Oh, I want one of those. Holding a stuffed animal, debriefing with partners. Yeah, these are great. Writing down my feelings, lighting a candle. These are such good ideas. Thank you all for sharing them. Yeah, getting some distraction, crying, love it, drinking water. I love it. Great. I think that is good stuff to have. It's really fun to see who's here. There's so many beloved friends, students, people I admire. It's really fun. You never know who's going to show up. Okay. I wanted to tell you all this whole thing is a draft. I hope you'll take what you like and leave the rest. I have a limited viewpoint based on my life experience. I would love to hear about how it's limited now or later, but yeah, just I hope it's useful. And also I don't claim to really know anything besides that I've been in and watched a lot of sticky situations. I'll say that what motivates me to like do this kind of work, some of you may know, like my other, bigger projects have been about like queer and trans liberation and racial and economic justice and prison abolition and mutual aid. And I've been for more than 20 years part of various movements on those topics. And what's happened is that over that time, I've seen that we're fighting these fights against these brutal systems like white supremacy and colonialism and patriarchy. And we're also really struggling with how those things have shaped us and how they shape how we treat each other and what happens inside our social movement organizations. And I think we really, really need very bold, strong social movement organizations that can bring almost everyone into them if we're going to not all die shortly from the extractive mechanisms we live under. So a lot of my life is focused on like, how can we build organizations where people can feel belonging and safety and treat each other well, make really hard decisions together and like share stuff and like face crisis. And so for about 6 or 7 years, I've been working on a project that's kind of about like where we break down around a lot of that stuff, because it's like the same things over and over again. And one slice of that is how we treat each other when sex and romance are in the mix. And so, yeah, so I've been working on like basically like a set of self-help books for radicals. And one of them is about sex and romance, just based on my own experiences of acting like a total dick and having other people do so too. Some people on this call have witnessed that and been part of it. You remember my 20s, as do I. So anyway, this is just like a very, 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 very basic part of that project. It's just this question of like, what is the romance myth? How does it hurt us? And what is actually true if that's the myth? And how can we, how can we navigate that? The realm of sex and romance brings up a lot of really big, sometimes really wonderful, interesting feelings, can crack us open, can lead us to healing wounds that have been with us, usually from, childhood and early caregiver stuff. And also be like, oh shit, we're playing with fire. Like there is actually something really intense here. And people really hurt each other in this way. And as I'm sure you all know, it's estimated that 30% of relationships, queer or straight, have domestic violence in them. My personal belief is that people tend to act their very worst in this realm. And there are a lot of complex reasons for that aren't about us being bad people. They're about cultural structures that we're living under. And so learning how to talk about that and become more choiceful and less reactive and become people who can really find out why and when our actions are aligning with our beliefs is really essential, because we often find ourselves quite outside our beliefs in this realm. So yeah, take what you like and leave the rest. I look forward to hearing what I'm not thinking about correctly. Couple background assumptions that I bring to this conversation that I just want to say in case they're useful. I believe that humans are social, and that a lot of how we feel and think about everything in our lives is conditioned by social norms. I don't believe in talking about how people are naturally this and naturally that. I think it's very hard to tell what, if anything, is inherent. Although I increasingly believe that people are inherently collaborative and connective. But you can challenge me that. But we certainly have seen how that can be like conditioned out of us too. We can make war and exploit each other and hurt each other. But yeah, I believe people are social. I believe that we are not all conditioned the same. So you can't make generalizations about all people, even if we all encounter dominant culture a lot. And even if we're from the same subcultures or share identities, we have different experiences of things that are made up of so many layers. So it's like, how can we both talk about patterns and be careful about generalizations? I believe that sexual, gender, and family formation norms are very important to controlling people and to extracting. Like they are central. They're not, we live in a patriarchal world that wants to be like, oh, that's girl stuff, or like, that's silly stuff. But actually, I think it's vital stuff that structures who lives and who dies. And I believe that sexual and family formation norms are co-constitutive with white supremacy, colonialism, capitalism, ableism. Why am I using such a big word, co-constitutive? I just love that word. I thought it was worth using and telling you what I think it means. Because I don't think we should really use words like that if we're not going to say. I think it means, or how I'm using it is that things that are created together, braided together, intertwined, inseparable. Like we can't look at colonialism and not think about gender and family formation norms. We can't look at capitalism and not think about them. Like those things are all, they make each other is what I mean by co-constitutive, like they are constituted together. So this is some kind of slide with poppies on it about critical inquiry and deprogramming and pleasure and liberation. I don't even really know what that title really means. Okay, the romance myth. We are going to talk about what the myth is, in my opinion, how it hurts us, how it hurts our movements, and what's actually true about romance. And then at the end, we're gonna talk about friendship. So I wanted to start by just doing a little chat situation. If your first name starts with the letters A through M, when I count down and tell you, I want you to write in the chat what is one word or phrase that comes to mind when you think of the romance myth. And then we'll all read it. Okay. So 3, 2, 1, go. A through M. Hot lust, loneliness, death, scarcity, monogamy, chivalry, happily ever after, the one person, chaotic, boyfriend, rom-com, straight, manipulation, subservient, isolation, cheating, desire, confused. These are good. Yikes. Claustrophobia, I love walks on the beach, pressure, oof, insecurity, projection, advertising, boundary, marriage, codependent, more drinks, sex, lies for bonded individualism, Disney, two against the world, dissolving, control. There's a lot of different words. We're a bunch of poets tonight, so it makes sense that we got like good stuff. Plato, divorce. Laughing my ass off, we got a good crowd. Other half. Oh yeah. Okay. All right, let's hear from our the other part of us. So when I count down, I want you to say which answer you saw in the last chat that resonated the most. If you're N through Z. 3, 2, 1. Answer it. Codependent, Disney, control, oof, insecurity, two against the world, patriarchy, a lot of codependency, a lot of two against the world, Disney shit, pressure, prenup, I love it, heterosexism, scarcity. Yeah, cool. Okay, we got a little sense of what's in the room. Thank you, that's fun. So I want to talk a little bit about some of the kind of ways that I see the romance myth stuff structured into, you know, the biggest structures we live under. Look at this horrifying picture of colonial settlers under American flags feeling romantic. I chose this picture because what I'm trying to talk about is the fact that gender, sexuality, and family formation norms, including the legal institution of marriage and legal racialized gender categories, have been essential to structures of colonialism, racial capitalism, patriarchy. So I want to talk a little bit about that. Like, why is establishing who's white and who's not, who's a landowner and who's not, who can vote and who's not, who's a woman and who's not, who's a man and who's not, who's a child and who's not, like, how are all these things, who's able-bodied, who's not, how are all these things connected into systems of control that we live under? And that includes definitions of things like gender and sex, and definitions of things like marriage, or you know, whose child, who belongs to whom. One part of this, obviously, that we have all been looking at our whole lives is that European or Christian marriage has had this key role in the history of, you know, colonialism in the world, in making women and children into men's property, right? And those laws have been applied not only to Europeans and Christians, but to also all the people who those people have controlled. When colonial forces have rolled out their systems on top of lands and peoples, they've rolled out the enforcement of their gender and sexuality norms, producing that same like gendered hierarchy in those property relations. And a lot of what this does, which we can still see really, really visibly today, is that it sets up a division of labor where women do unpaid or underpaid reproductive labor. That term reproductive labor, people talk about that as like all the work that makes it so like theoretically like the worker can get to the factory. Like if you've got this model of like a male worker who goes to the factory and it's like he's the paid person and nobody else in the family is paid, it's like who did the emotional labor, who took care of him as a child, who's going to take care of him when he's old and can't go to the factory anymore, who cleans the house, who cooks the food. It's like this has all been women's work. And then there's of course the complexity of it being women's work, but then particularly being sometimes the underpaid work or enslaved work of particular Black and Indigenous and other women of color. So the complexity around like reproductive labor, like the whole way to like get that free labor out of so many people is by having a gender system that makes only some people wage laborers. I would also make a broader argument about wage labor being a system of being conquered. It's not saying like the answer, though kind of typical white liberal feminist answer is like, so let's get women into wage labor too. I'm like, let's get rid of wage labor and the concentration of wealth. Anyway, we can go into that whenever you want. Okay. Another big piece of this, like I was saying, is that colonialism really required and like utilized and still utilizes these kinds of stories about gender and sex. So everywhere that I've ever studied colonialism in the world, one of the stories the colonizer has to tell is that we have to intervene on these people because they've got these backward gender and sex practices. Like they could be, they don't treat their women correctly, or their sexuality is too loose, or they don't look at them, they're naked. Like all these stories that are about how the colonizer has to go save the women of this place because of the impropriety of the way they live. The contemporary version would be like Barbara Bush being like, we have to invade Afghanistan to save the women of Afghanistan. You never saved anybody by bombing them. Or the story that's told commonly that people all over the world should support the government of Israel because it's like likes gay people and has and is like good gay politics. Like these rationales about civilized people having proper gender and sexuality norms and colonizable people having improper ones is like vital story. Here where I live, it was like a story about how Indigenous people lived in longhouses and they lived collectively, and that was inappropriate, and the longhouses needed to be burned by the settlers, which they were, and forced people to live in the nuclear family that was preferred by the Europeans, and take their children away and put them in boarding schools and try to undermine their cultural practices. And I'm sure many of you, this picture at the bottom here is a protest related to that. And I'm sure many of you know the stories about the kinds of torture and death that were faced by Indigenous children in boarding schools, in particular those who violated European gender norms. The third piece around this that I want to mention, of course, is the deep anti-Blackness of this framing. Under slavery, there was a system called natal alienation. What it meant was that enslaved people could not marry each other, and their children did not belong to them. Their children belonged to the slave owners. This is like a vital, essential to the structure of slavery, that enslaved people could not have the same family formation norms as those enslaving them or as free people. And then that changes after supposedly emancipation happens, which of course is an unfinished process. Then freed Black people were criminalized if they were unmarried. Part of the sort of Black codes, the special laws that applied to them that allowed them to be recaptured into a system of carcerality and forced work, was that adultery being a crime, various kinds of gender rule breaking being a crime, and then this ongoing system then and now of the separation of Black children from their families. As I'm sure many of you know, the work of Dorothy Roberts, some of her books are on this slide. She has a new book coming out that I'm really excited about. This idea that she's really helped people see, and many other scholars, that the family regulation system, sometimes called the child welfare system, targets Black and Indigenous families to a very high degree and separates those children. And she and others say this is actually an extension and continuation of slavery. Also during, the period after Jim Crow was explicitly ended, there was a long period where the legitimacy of children, i.e. did they have married parents, was used to maintain exclusion because Black families were less likely to marry. In general, people in the United States are more likely to marry if they have more property, because that's mainly what it does, is it allows people to share property and statuses they have. And so poorer people are less likely to marry. And so it was a way to continue to exclude Black people for a long time, even after Jim Crow rules were supposedly ended. So the point of this is just that like shaping our colonial and racial structures through marriage is very essential. And of course, we live, and this is a picture of Bill Clinton signing the welfare reform legislation in 1996. There's a long, long history in the United States of welfare being about gender regulation, especially being about a story that poor women, Black women, Indigenous women, other women of color are over-reproductive. The myth of the welfare queen, all of this is a story about how these women should marry, they shouldn't have as many children. All of this is a way of managing, controlling, criminalizing those targeted populations through narratives about proper gender and family formation. Of course, I'm sure, as you know, marriage is still used to determine who can immigrate. So literally, it's still like the kind of, one of the many ways that we keep the gates of the nation and make some people so incredibly vulnerable to extreme labor exploitation and other forms of, caging. So I'm curious whether what I didn't include in that incredibly quick overview, right? What other histories and structures would you name that show us how gender, sexuality, and family formation norms are co-constitutive, my fancy word, co-shape white supremacy, colonialism, ableism, heteropatriarchy, and other systems of control? What else? What's history, structures? Maybe there's a particular institution you're thinking of where you see gender and sexuality, family formation norms getting enforced. Yeah, capitalism, people talking about transnational adoption, marriage as legal punishment, machismo, losing disability benefits if you get married. Eugenics, yes, a whole underlying thing here is eugenics, thank you. Eugenics was all about trying to figure out how they could get like people from the good stock to marry each other and how to sterilize everybody else, right? And it's still, people in prison, they're still being sterilized. Purity culture, yeah, the medical industrial complex enforces these rules. The idea of having illegitimate children. Village land ownership here only passes through a male lineage, interesting. Schools, education, universities, yes. The idea of spinsters. Taxes, yes, our tax system is still determined by marriage. Religion, the nonprofit industrial complex. I mean, there are still organizations in the United States that are doing marriage promotion programs that are paid for by their state governments and sometimes by the federal government, where they will pay you if you're on welfare to get married with the idea that somehow it'll make you less poor. It doesn't work. Poor people, if they're going to get married, they're going to marry other poor people. Indian Child Welfare Act being dismantled. Thank you. The same political forces who fight the existence of gender sexual diversity are the ones who lift up racial capitalism the most. Yeah, thank you. Reproductive rights, gay liberation through marriage rather than focused on inherent identity value. Yeah, thanks. Yes, as you all know, I'm severely anti-marriage. Okay. Yeah, only being able to share healthcare if you're married. Exactly. I mean, in the whole same-sex marriage advocacy moment, it was all like, oh my God, there's 1,000 rights that attach to marriage. We've got to get this for same-sex couples, as opposed to like, let's just have there be nothing that attaches to this thing about how you choose to like organize your family life. Like, why do any benefits attach to that? It's pure social control, right? But certain white mainstream gay organizations decided to not care about that, and instead try to get a piece of the pie. And I would say they managed to also like they restored, I think in the 1960s and 70s social movement period, there was actually a lot of illegitimacy of marriage. Like people started to be like, this is ridiculous. There was a kind of free love thing happening. There was these critiques coming from all kinds of different anti-racist, anti-colonial movements and feminist movements about marriage. And that was really cleaned up by the same-sex marriage movement. It was like, marriage is about dignity and love and, happy families. And it's like, no, it's always been about a site of violence, exploitation, abuse, racialized control. Great. Yeah, people are saying great things in the chat. Thank you. Let's look at this slide. Okay, so let's talk about the romance myth and what it is. It's like, I'm seeing this slide. Okay. This is also obscene. Okay, I'm just gonna say a bunch of things I think are included in the romance myth, and then, we can see what I missed. So, big thing that the romance myth tells us is that a committed romantic and sexual relationship is the most important kind of relationship. It's like, it's your priority. It defines whether your life is good or bad. It's like such a horrible, toxic message. It also tells us that there's something wrong with you if you aren't in one, and you will never be happy. I'm sorry to even say this stuff out loud to you guys. If you're in the right relationship, it will make you happy, and sex and level flow easily and naturally. Have you all found that? the story is that love is forever if it is real. This is the whole story of marriage. I definitely think that like part of that is that the nation state needs to have a story that it's forever, even though of course all nations rise and fall constantly and borders constantly change all over the world, you know, to the extent that for the period where nation states have existed, which is a short one. But like having us tape our foreverness to the nation state through law is, you know, essential. Your romantic partner should meet all your emotional needs. That definitely is going to work out for you. Oh, look at these people. Other things, if it's real, you would give up anything for each other, and you should. If it's real, you'd want to die if the person left you. There's a lot of songs about that I really love. There is one right person out there for each of us. Look at these fools. Okay, this takes place in Seattle, this show. If you really love each other, you will not be attracted to other people. You'll be consistent in love and sexual attraction for each other. That'll never change at all. If your love is real, you will feel loved, whole, and complete. If you don't, there's something wrong with you or your partner or your love. There's a clear set of things a romantic partner should want to do with you, and there's something wrong with you if they don't, or something wrong with them. So you can see like the resentment this builds. Oh, Edward and Bella. Apparently it's natural to find a permanent romantic partner, live together, make a lifelong commitment, and have children. If you don't want those things, or you don't want them in that order or whatever, there's something wrong with you, or it's not really love. And we're all supposed to compete for the best possible partners. Best is defined by racial, economic, health, and body shape norms. Dating is a competitive market, and you should make sure you get the best possible for your long-term commitment, trading up as you need to. So it's very like brutal disposability culture stuff, and you know, all the stuff like, oh, I need to marry somebody rich and somebody fit and all of that stuff that so makes us all feel terrible. What else? What did I miss? What else does the romance myth say? Yes, somebody asked if they can see these slides later. Yeah, I can give them to the Poetry Project to post with the video. False romantic in people. Wonder if there's such a thing as true romantic. There's a really good Indigo Girls song called True Romantic. The partner market. Yeah, I've seen some really great research about the ways that the partner market really deserves, like, you know, like Black women are put to the bottom of the partner market, or people with disabilities, like just the ways it really like reinforces this disposability that's super racialized. Your romantic partner is more important than your friends. Yeah, that is such a strong message. Yeah, it's not okay to be asexual in this framework, obviously. We do love the Indigo Girls. The institution of marriage somehow legitimizes your relationship. That's somehow romantic to have one's commitment be bound by the law and the state. Yeah, like it's going to be so cute at City Hall or whatever. City Hall, it's like dripping with blood, you know? It's not cute. There's something wrong with you if you're not partnered. Yeah, you're going to die lonely. I mean, I don't know if other old gay people in here felt like the story they were told, like it was like so tragic if people found out you were gay who loved you because they were gonna because you were gonna die alone. Like that's the, you know, like, oh, so terrible. Bitter old queen myth. Yes. You'll never have children. Opposite gender friends are inappropriate. I don't know if anybody else grew up in a situation like this, but where I'm from, like a rural area, it felt like people are supposed to have friends like in high school. And then like once you like finish high school, you like get married, and then like you just hang out with you and your partner's blood family. Like friends are like a adolescent thing or something, which is, you know, it's horrible for those of us who life and death, whether we have friends. Yeah. Great. Your closest bond should be sexual and partnered. Yeah. Crohn's as unloved or undesirable. Yeah, that's really helpful too. The depth of ageism in it, because the period we romanticize youth, and that is the period where this love story is supposed to happen. And so the idea that people are unattractive after a certain age, and that if you haven't landed your whatever, your disposable, and the whole long history of women being traded out for younger women, right? Like in this kind of straight model. And then different ways that queers also pick up on that terrible idea. Man is the steer picker of who and when marriage happens. Yes. And all the stuff about like needing to trap a man and all of that. Yeah. Shaming the unfaithful. Yeah, your love story is supposed to coincide with your peak wage labor phase. Really interesting. You guys are so smart. So yeah, joking about hating your spouse. Yeah. And also like men are from Mars, women are from Venus, like all of that. straight stuff that I think, yeah, justifies a lot of disrespect. If you have boundaries, they mean you don't love each other. Yeah, like if you don't, if like if we're dating and I don't want to move in with you, it must mean I don't love you and I'm wasting your time because we're on this escalator and has to go to the top, right? Um, I'm curious if people in the chat will name a song, movie, TV show, or book that taught you the romance myth. Was there something the first thing when you were young, or that really stands out for you, like where you learned this myth? Titanic, Young and a Little Restless. Oh, soaps, I love them. Princess Bride, 10 Things I Hate About You, Barry White, Three's Company. Oh yeah, Mexican novellas. Yeah, so good. Disney Cinderella, Footloose. Yeah, Bollywood. Maybe I want to say Grease for me. Um, The Bachelor. Almost every movie and song. The Little Mermaid, The Golden Compass. Interesting. The Hunger Games, Angel and Buffy. Trage. 500 Days of Summer, The Sound of Music. Yeah, Star Wars, George Michael, R.I.P. Felicity, yeah, so true. Interesting, yeah, to see this. Oh, the history of poetry. Friends, oh God, Ross and Rachel, just kill us now. Pretty Little Liars. How to Lose a Guy in 10 Days. I mean, every rom-com, right? Oh my God. Yeah, the L Word. Oh, interesting. Yeah, Gossip Girl. So good. All right, so I want to talk a little bit. It's everything you guys are putting in here is so good. Okay, how does the romance myth damage our relationships? I never saw this movie, Jerry Maguire, but like there was a radio song on for some period where they like their song excerpted this this line, "You complete me," you know, and I feel like it was really meaningful to people in a scary, disturbing way. Okay. I really had a good time when I made these slides. So how does it damage our relationships? My thoughts. One is that we believe in mind reading. It's like, you know, if you don't know that I want a diamond ring, then like, you know, you don't love me. Or if you don't know how to say just exactly the things I want, like this whole thing where we think it's one standard experience and that whatever we're feeling or thinking, the other person should know and should feel the same, as opposed to like, oh yeah, like you love being talked to first thing in the morning, but like actually I need a lot of space in the morning. Or I mean, like all the ways in which people are actually different. And then we judge each other about it. We criticize our partners for not knowing what we want. We assume our partner's sexual, social, or other needs will be quote unquote normal, which is whatever we think is normal, or that whatever we've heard culturally is normal. So I mean, I think I see this a lot. Like you know, people are like, "Oh, can you believe this? Like that person wants to be in an open relationship, or that person wants to only see each other once a week, or whatever. Like that's, if you loved me, you wouldn't feel that way." Like this kind of like it's just like people are not allowed to be in choice. And how is that going to turn out, you know, between people if you can't make choices? We judge ourselves or each other if we don't want what we believe is normal. We make life plans without adequate reflection based on the romance myth lies. I mean, how many people have moved like across the country, have left all your friends, have dropped out of school, or have gone to school somewhere weird, or have taken a job because their date thought that would be better, or have had a kid they didn't want to have, or have, you know, not had a kid they wanted to have, or like whatever. Like it's just like people are just like, well, I have to keep this relationship above all, even if I also think we just are really bad at evaluating like how it's feeling, because it's like how it could feel or how it felt when we were first in love. And so it's like actually what's happening is day to day we're bickering, or day to day we're hurting each other or whatever, but we're remembering what it should be like, and or what it once felt like, or a fantasy of what it once felt like. And that's keeping us tied to something that's often like not really working, or making us make agreements that aren't negotiated from a place that's where where everybody gets to have dignity. We undermine and neglect our friendships and other supports, which can lead to isolation. I'm sure many of you are also friends and fans of the brilliant artist and activist Tourmaline. I feel like maybe 15 years ago, Tourmaline said to me, like, yeah, the most dangerous thing is isolation. And it has never left me. Like, I mean, people here who are my students know I always talk about this. It's like, when whatever bad might befall you, if you're isolated, it's going to be so much worse, right? Like you're not going to have anybody there to help you, or to stay on their couch, or to come to the hospital and see you, or, you know, like if you don't know anyone in your neighborhood and the storm comes or the lights go out, like isolation is the most dangerous thing for all of us, and our society deeply pushes us to isolate, and romantic relationships are one of those ways. It's like this person's supposed to be like your only friend, your only support, the only person you confide in. A lot of people have agreements in their romantic relationships that we won't talk to anybody else about what's going on in our relationship, which is really dangerous. So like, I can't talk to my friends about what's hard between us. Like, that's going to get more and more entrenched. It's very unlikely that we'll be able to move out of the dynamic or heal or get help if we need it, right? That kind of isolation is really common. It can even be kind of unspoken. Yeah. Look at those diamonds, blood diamonds. I don't know if anybody else has ever read the history of how we got the diamond engagement ring and how it's this whole thing with like the De Beers diamond industry and colonialism, etc. Anyway, don't buy them. It leads to resentment and blame for all the reasons we're talking about with reading minds. Jealousy and possessiveness are normalized. So it's like, if I'm not like, I don't want you to see your friends, then I must not love you. Like, people like literally feel like affirmed and seen by jealousy, which is really intense, and by possessiveness. Just reminding everybody, really fun to role play possessiveness, really shitty to actually do it. Dissatisfaction based on an unattainable fantasy of romantic love. So a lot of people are just like, not actually like, if you want to engage with another human being, like, you're like, oh yeah, like there's days when you're off, there's things that are not my favorite about you, there's things I like better about this friend than you, and then you can make decisions like, oh, I think when I go see dance, I want to do this friend who literally loves dance, not with you who hates it or whatever, or when I want to talk about my favorite ideas about anarchist theory, I'm going to talk to this other person because they're really into it and you get bored, whatever, right? But when we think someone's supposed to be everything, then we're often really unsatisfied and resentful. And we treat each other and view ourselves in dehumanizing ways, evaluating each other like commodities and applying harmful cultural norms. I mean, the way people treat their spouses and dates, and about like weight loss and fitness, and I'm just, get rid of that loser and get yourself a winner, like all this kind of story that's just like these brutal hierarchies of valuation that are so dehumanizing and really normalized. And we blame each other for our feelings, or believe we're responsible for other people's feelings. I mean, this is the definition of codependency, a word that many of you, I mean, in my idea of a definition, I'm sure there's a million definitions, but that codependency is when I think that your feelings are my fault, or my feelings are your fault. I feel unsatisfied. What are you not doing for me? Instead of like, what's the total picture here? Where does my feeling come from? Does it have anything to do with you? Is it just something I'm carrying around? Does it come from my childhood? Am I, like whatever? Or I'm like, oh, you're mad or sad or whatever. I have to do something about it. Or your depression or anxiety is my fault, or, this is a recipe for disaster and heartbreak and loss. How else? What am I missing? How else does the romance myth damage our relationships? I mean, some of this is already in this chat. You guys are saying so much. Breeding ground for ignorance. Yeah, someone says, I don't know anyone who still believe in the whole myth. And I think that that's true. A lot of people have lost parts of it. Sometimes I think it comes back up for people once they're in a stressful situation, or I'm believing part of it and you're believing another part, and we're in conflict. Or sometimes I think people I know who are like amazing, like feminists and like have a real analysis of this, then when they're actually in a situation with a date, it all comes out again, it damages our ability to care for ourselves. Yeah, we often don't choose ourselves. We lose people we care about when they become partnered. Yes, it's so sad. Assumes everything will stay the same, never change, not recognizing red flags. Causes you to be cold to casual acquaintances because you don't want them to default believe that you want to marry them. Yeah, or your spouse or date or whatever is jealous all the time. You disappoint others. That undermines true intimacy. We change ourselves to maintain the false myth and try to make it true. I've heard people use this term love jail. I think it's problematic because I want to take really seriously when people are actually put in a cage. But this idea that a lot of people early in a relationship disappear from their friends, spend all their time with this person. I mean, not only is it such a bummer because it's just going to burn it out faster, that fun part's going to end sooner, but also it's like, oftentimes it's actually quite dangerous, right? Like it's like quite dangerous to isolate. I guess, I'm sure a lot of you have had these experiences, but a lot of people in my life, like the worst things that have happened to them in the context of a romantic relationship, like that was where they lost everything, or that was when they were really hurt physically or got involved in something really dangerous. It's like a time when you got to keep some people around who can be like, hey, Dean, what's up? You know, I'm worried about you. You have stopped going to work, or you have stopped talking to your friends, or it seems like this person is really controlling, or whatever. Like, we often can't tell what's happening because we're under like the influence of sex chemicals, maybe, or because the influence of the romance myth. Oh my God, I finally found the one. I didn't believe in it, but now I do. You know, how many people are like, yeah, until he gets married, but now I found the one, I'm gonna get married. You know, people get intoxicated, which can be super fun. But like, I definitely am like, I need a safety plan for this shit, you know? Weird pressure of romance, home, private sector is where we're supposed to get support for leaving the home to engage in wage labor. Yeah, totally. Normalizing emotional violence because it's a commitment for the long term, so we should put up with it. Yeah, that's really interesting. Yeah, it's so interesting. Expectations. Yeah. We stay in relationships that are hurting us because we're afraid of being alone. Right. When you make this mean alone, not having that one thing is alone. There's so many ways to have people in your life. Like that idea that that's the alone is going to put so much pressure on us all to stay in that stuff. Not having networks of care and support. Yeah, I'm sure some people have heard this idea, but I'm just going to mention it because it's been so useful to me. This idea that I first learned from a group that was called the Icarus Project and is now called the Fireweed Collective. And they have a zine about it on their website. Maybe somebody could put the link in. It's a zine about, I think the zine might be called Madness and Oppression, but the zine is about this idea called mad mapping. And the idea is that when you know that you sometimes go into really intense states, like if I'm like, oh, I go into mania or I go into anxiety or whatever, and that when I go into that state, I tend to like lose perspective on some things and maybe make some weird decisions or have some weird behaviors. You can make a map when you're not in that state of what you wish you knew when you're in that state. And you can share it with yourself and you can also share it with your friends. It could be like, if I say these things, don't call the cops, or it could be like, please don't ask me this question while I'm in that state, or please do bring me these things. Please do not bring me these things. Please contact me this way. Do not contact me this way. Like whatever you might need from friends when you're in a special state. But for me, that idea is really useful. And I have used that for a long time around specifically like falling into crush or love. Like, okay, Dean, you really lose it. You know, you may think you want to plan elaborate travel with someone you just met. You may think that you want to like really ditch some of your obligations or like not see your friends as much or whatever it is that are my things. These are signs that I might be doing this. These are ways to bring balance that a person, when I'm not in the intoxicated state, I can see this would bring balance. It's like, to me, it's a state of madness for me. And so I think it's useful to like, we could do that with any, I just led my students through like, how do you do a mad map for exam period? You know, like, oh, right. A lot of them are like, yeah, I stopped sleeping. Yeah, I stop eating well, or I eat junk food, or I, you know, whatever. People, you're like, I know what I do, but when I'm doing it, I forget, you know? And I think the mad mapping tool is really helpful for like intense states, whatever they are, that visit us intermittently. And asking our friends to help us with boundaries if we are comfortable doing that. Okay, how does the romance myth hurt our movements for liberation? Look at that sunset. Oh, I think those people might be wearing really ugly shorts. Okay, one big thing is that we act out our conditioned frameworks of sex and romance in ways that can really, you know, harm our movement spaces, right? So it can be like, I mean, there's a million versions of this. There's people harassing other people in movement space. There's people getting in, like having a falling in love and then a breaking up with somebody in movement space and being really unprincipled and like, I can't be anywhere where that person is. And like the whole group kind of falling apart. And, you know, there's people like having a lot of unprincipled, you know, sexual contact inside a social movement context in which a lot of people are feeling like erased or fucked over, or someone's using certain kinds of privilege or access to seduce people, and then the space falling apart and people feeling like competitive with each other. There's people just doing the things that are really normal in romance, like lying. If you're also in social movement together where you're relying on each other to do basic things to help people keep people alive and reduce suffering, it's a big deal to break trust in that way. So to me, part of what I'm trying to think about this is like, the romance myth stuff matters so much because if it makes me act unprincipled and different than I would have otherwise wanted to act with people in my social movement groups, I need to clean that up. I need to get some self-awareness about how I act. Like, do I disappear? Do I flake? Do I misrepresent myself to people I'm trying to have sex with? Do I feel jealous of everybody else who's prettier than me? Like whatever my baggage is, which of course comes from this romance myth, it's not about blaming ourselves from that, but being like, could we have some shared principles around how we're all trying to move in it, and also maybe some shared language and ideas so that when I'm not moving that way, people I'm working with could be like, Dean, you know, we love that you're so slutty, but the way you're fucking your way through this group is kind of like, you know, maybe not thinking ahead or whatever. Exactly. Or could you communicate with people differently about what you're doing? Or you keep making people think that they're like, you're only one and you're, you know, a lot of people do that, you know, like, and that they're going to fall in love, but then you drop them 2 weeks later and then they stop coming to our group or whatever, you know, like there's a million ways people do this. Not to mention things, you know, the romance myth justifies things like stalking and, you know, all kinds of more explicit abuse. People in their minds are you often using the romance myth to justify this behavior. Maybe some of you have heard this idea that when we're in a victim mentality is often when we hurt people the most. And so like, I think I see a lot of this in the realm of romance where it's like, when I'm like, but I'm overcome with my love for you and you don't give a fuck about me. Now it's okay that I stalk you. Now it's okay that I intimidate you. You know, I'm overcome by my jealousy. So it's okay that I flew into this rage. Like there's a way in which people believe they're disempowered inside the myth, because the romance myth is about being out of control and it's so heroic, but it's actually not heroic to dominate people just because you feel like a victim. You know what I mean? So I just see that pattern a lot. Those are maybe the more extreme examples, but also the smaller examples that can still really break trust in social movement groups around jealousy or competition, or gossip, right? I mean, gossip is huge, but gossip is so undermining to group dynamics, right? Like it's really great to have people to vent to. It's really great to solve problems about social dynamics. It's not about like keeping secrets, but it's like, are we all talking behind someone's back in the group and we're not talking directly to them? Am I talking to people in a way that's designed to split loyalties, like this kind of stuff? And a lot of times the ways people get stirred up around sex and romance, like more of that happens than if we were just talking about like when's the meal delivery or whatever. Yeah, really, really hard stuff. I do want to say, I mean, I'll give various resources during this talk, but I recently read the Jealousy Workbook. What is that person's name? I'm forgetting her name. She's some kind of like long-term person in the poly world. That workbook is full of detailed examples. I really recommend it. It's a really useful workbook. It really helped me feel like, I think a lot of people are just like, I can't help jealousy. Jealousy just happens to me. And it's like, just like other feelings, we can practice with it. We don't have to act it all out, you know, like just whatever. It was a really useful book. Yes, thank you, Kathy Labriola. Thank you. Really helpful. Okay, so how else does the romance myth damage our movements? What have I not talked about? Someone wrote, it cultivates learned helplessness dependency through obscuring emotional needs. Or on the flip side, validating one's own worth by being useful to another. Wow, really interesting. You guys are so smart. Plato said love is a grave of mental disease. Wow, I wonder what that really means. It lies to us that we're not at our full strength or ability without a partner. Gets us pregnant. It sucks up the time and our time and takes our capacity away from our organizing. It excuses sexism. Yeah, it undermines efforts to have a healthy and productive conflict. Yeah, a lot of us aren't really practicing giving feedback and stuff because we got this whole mind reading story happening in our love realm. So it's people into different camps. Yeah. A lot of that whole thing, oh, when we break up, who's going to be your friend, who's going to be mine, we're going to split forever, like my ex is my enemy, like that's all part of the romance myth too, the like endless vengefulness being justified. Weakens the social fabric that extends beyond the relationship. Yeah, right. I mean, because it isolates people, it takes people away, like literally just takes people out of movement. It tells us that we just need to take care of our partner. Search for the romance myth causes us to shut down our basic needs. I need to go out to this party, attend this gathering, even though I don't want to because the one might be there. Oh, that's really interesting. Yeah. Yeah. It motivates a lot of fear of missing out because people are like, I gotta land a person before I'm too old or too whatever, because we dismiss all those kinds of people. Yeah. It's really so hard. Shows we still need to integrate how to honor our humanity and our idealisms. Yeah. Right. Because part of it is like, it's okay that this stuff is fun to play with and that it's powerful. Like it's so powerful. It's so, I mean, I'm sure many people in this room have had experiences of deep healing through sex and romance. And I want to really honor that. it's not about not having those things, but it's about like, just, can we build some more shared awareness of what they're like and what we individually, what's dangerous for us individually and what we need to get support to really act our best selves. People are not valued in movements because they are evaluated by beauty, fitness, ableist standards. Yeah, totally. So, and yeah, so much looksism. Yeah. Perpetuates performative actions rather than authentic action. I mean, part of it too is just this thing where it's like, I want to be seen looking like an activist on Instagram, but because it's all about my personal brand, which makes me sexy, rather than I want to be part of something that could actually reduce human suffering in these horrible apocalyptic times. You know, like, how do we help people move deep in that connection to the work, you know, and that individualism in the romance myth doesn't help us. The idea of heartbreak also stops accountability dead. Boom. Yeah. Yeah. Really helpful. You all are so smart. Oh, I loved this comic. It says, we have our love for each other. Nothing else matters. And it's like this straight couple with this baby between them. It's just like, you know, the world of two, as someone was mentioning, many people were mentioning before. Oh, that's funny. I will say that the romance myth is totally helpful for getting people to organizing meetings when crushes are present. Yes, because the thing is, we want to draw people to our movements by saying, yes, if you come here, this will be a space where you can have safety, dignity, and belonging, which means, yeah, hope you do meet an awesome date. Hope you meet best friends. Hope you like build relationships that blow your mind and are amazing. And then the flip side of that is, like, you're here for a date and you're going to leave when you've got one, or you're going to leave when the person doesn't like you back, or, you know what I mean? Like, how do we actually make a space where we can have people be fucking or having crushes or getting into relationships and have that be not threatening to our ability to have organizations that continue, which we really need, and that can let in a lot of people. All right. So I want to talk a little bit about what I think is true about romance, which is different from the myth. A lot of this won't be surprising. We need support from a lot of different people. Like, we all need a support system that isn't just one person. It's just safer for our survival. There's no normal way of being or relating. We have to tell people how we want to be treated. They can say yes or no. And if they say no, we can seek our needs elsewhere, meet them ourselves, or live without them being met. You know, like, I want someone to cuddle with me every night. This person I'm having sex with doesn't want to do it. They don't have to want to do it. They're not bad for not wanting to do it. I can see if I have any friends who want to, or somebody else I'm having sex with, or I can just not have someone to cuddle with every night. Like, all of those are legit options. Like, nobody has to do what I want because it's normal or right. You know, like, that move has got to shift. Right? We can just ask people things and they can say yes or no. And our inability to say no to people and to hear no from people is at the center of so many of our conflicts. There's no natural way to have sex. Sexual relationships require negotiation and renegotiation. People don't have to keep wanting to have sex with you because they used to, etc. Being attracted to someone else besides a partner does not mean there's something wrong with our relationship. I mean, I don't know. I hope everybody knows that by now, but it's just like so wild that that is still something people hold over each other, and it's just unworkable. You know, it's like you're just asking people to lie to you and then be mad at them about it. We do not have to act out all of our sexual and romantic, I can't see what that word is, attractions. This is a really big one because people are just like, yeah, I don't know. Then I met her and I was just overcome and I just had to do it. It was love. Like, there's a romance myth thing that justifies like not ending the monogamous thing you were in before you start the next thing, if that's what you were doing, or communicating directly about, like, yes, people are impacted by other people's sexual choices sometimes. And if you've agreed to that, you actually are not like an out of control love machine that cannot stop yourself. Like, that story it feels very like straight culture to me. And it's so problematic and untrue. No relationship will make you happy. We bring our long-term patterns and feelings into any relationships we enter. So if I am jealous a lot, I'm probably going to feel it in my friendships. I'm going to feel it no matter who I date. It's not because they're doing something wrong. Or if I often feel lonely, like a lot of people have like just like a deep loneliness thing, makes sense, came from family stuff or childhood stuff, whatever. Like, if I feel lonely, it's not because you're not doing something, right? Like, my feelings are not someone else's fault. I might see if they indicate something like, oh, I wish I had more of this kind of company, or I wish I had more, I can make requests and then people can still say yes or no. Right. So this idea that like, this will just make me happy, is just not helpful. It's a setup. Romantic relationships start up strong, difficult. Sorry, it's like my screen is covered by 1,000 things. Complex feelings, often after an initial stage of elation. I mean, just to be real, like there's a pattern. There's a lot of really great books about it. Most of them are really straight, problematic books, but I've read them all and I'm happy to tell you about what they say. But this, there is a pattern in which people you meet, for a lot of people that do have that go through this pattern, you meet that person, you idealize them, you imagine that you're going to get all the care that you subconsciously that you never got from your caregivers as a child. From them, you're like, oh, and that they often represent like a freedom, like they have a capacity that you don't have and that you long for. Like, well, look at how free they are in this, or look at how confident they are, or whatever. And then you idealize them, and you also are both acting in your best behavior. And then because you're excited and you want to impress each other, and then people fatigue about the best behavior. And sometimes people, once they feel like, I've got them, they're mine, start to see the other side. Like, oh, it's not how I thought it was, or, oh, it's actually, I find that thing really annoying when I do it for this long, or whatever. And then a conflict stage ensues, right? Like that's a very typical pattern, and there's nothing wrong with anybody in it for that happening. And it's not true that they've changed. That's not true. You've both continued to show more of yourselves. But that pattern can be very pronounced for some people, and it can lead to like lots of like, serial relationships that can be hurtful, or it can lead to a lot of blaming. And learning about how if that pattern does live in you, how it lives in you, can be a really helpful way to not just act it out on people and hurt them. Romantic relationships can be a place to learn about ourselves and grow, but they are not more necessary or more important than other relationships. If I could say one thing about the whole genre of relationship self-help books, it's like that you could read them all about friendships. Like, yes, if you meet a friend, they also have an attachment pattern. They all, whatever the theory of those different books is, there's romance in friendships where you like, oh my God, I idealize you. I see this a lot in activist groups. I idealize you. Oh my God, I finally found people like me. I'm going to be so happy. And then, or idealize the group, and then like crash and burn as soon as one thing is said that makes me feel like I'm different, or that didn't work out, So those patterns are not exclusive to sex and romance. And we could use the tools for thinking that through elsewhere, although they are often pitched in sex and romance. People act like super, super bad to each other. Neither staying in relationships nor breaking up is better or worse. This is really huge. Our culture really embraces the idea that breaking up is a failure, and that you shouldn't break up, and that you should stay together no matter what, and that loyalty and longevity are the most important things about relationships. Not true. I think when people break up, they often get to have like developmental leaps. Like oftentimes it's really amazing. You get to be like, oh my God, I don't have to be who I was when I started this relationship 10 years ago. Who am I now? That can be really amazing. You can also have those developmental leaps inside a relationship. I had one therapist who said that she felt like if people were in long relationships, at some point they renegotiated and were in a totally new relationship. I was like, that often has to happen every few years or something. I love that idea, because it's like, how can we account for how much, hopefully, everyone in this relationship is getting to change, and grow. What else do I have in here? Oh, there's still more. Good feelings that seem to stem from the new relationship do not come from the other person. They are our own capacities for connection, joy, satisfaction, pleasure, creativity, relaxation, and excitement. When I have a really big crush on people, as several people in this room who've been on the other side of that with me know, I really like to make a lot of crafts, and I want to listen to the music. I feel all this creativity that's otherwise pretty much unavailable to me as like, a wordy nerd. And then I'm like, it's them. They're an artist. They're, you know what I mean? And it's like, no, it's just part of me, and like, it's really fun that people provoke and stimulate things in us, but it's really helpful and grounding to remember that these things are in me and not in like that I don't need the other person. Or if you're having an incredible sexual experience, like you had the capacity for that pleasure or that creativity. And it's wonderful that you found someone to provoke you. And it's not to dismiss the significance of that person, but it's just so helpful to realize that there's no scarcity. Like if this person doesn't like me this way or doesn't want to do this anymore, now I can like reach for this experience in other ways with other people. Or maybe I'll never have that experience again also, and that would be okay. I mean, which is about like facing the fact that all things come to an end and change, and that we all do die, and that sometimes you don't have an experience again. And that's like, can I also tolerate that reality? But part of it is just like, I can cultivate these feelings like with myself in other kinds of connections, etc. committed relationships, poly relationships, monogamous relationships, anonymous sex, brief relationships, and open relationships are all politically and morally equal. This is so huge, you know, I mean, especially as a queer, I feel this is so essential. Like, we have a lot of public sex, we have a lot of, not all of us, but many of us, you know, queer culture has a lot of anonymous sex, group sex, etc. Like, we, like, all of that is just as important as people's monogamous relationships, as live-in relationships, as child rearing relationships. And at the same time, in our culture, there's a lot of people who are like, you know, poly is radical and it's terrible to be monogamous. Like, it's just really not helpful for us to judge each other's relationship patterns. It's like, the goal is to have people be able to choose what they are doing and to not be forced to do things they don't want to do, and to have as many, like, as much as possible, a sense of dignity in what they're entering and consenting to. So we want to get rid of things that are coercive, whether that's a norm that you have to be poly, or a norm that you have to be monogamous, whether it's a norm that you have to want to have anonymous sex, or whether it's a norm that you have to never want to have anonymous sex. We just want to be like, everybody gets to do their thing. And ideally they have a bunch of friends to talk to about it, so they're not alone or scared, and they get really good advice about how to be healthy in doing it, and have the, you know, consent practices that'll make it as awesome as possible, and how to get support when that's not happening. Like, that's what we want. And any kind of like shame or ranking moves us away from that. Most of what is going on inside each of us about our romantic partnerships is our own story and experience, and has little to do with the other person. This is like the least romantic thing I've ever said. Right? This is just really real. Like, while I'm like freaking out about how beautiful and amazing you are, I'm like, you know, maybe you can't really see that clearly. You know, like, I think we see our romantic partners less clearly than we see almost anyone, you know? And that's fun. But it's also just like, this is my projections I'm living in. I feel like it can just be a little bit helpful to know that. It can just give me like that like little quarter inch of like critical space of like, maybe I don't need to like act out every weird thing I'm thinking about this person on them, because maybe this is kind of about me and my stuff, you know, and my prior experiences and my emotional landscape and my unmet needs. I think it's helpful to know that, because we love to, I have, my friend Colby has called it when I throw my screaming baby at you, you know, like, it's like, I'm like, man, you weren't here on time. You don't love me enough. It's like, this is like, it's like, let's try to not throw our screaming baby at each other. Let's, like, we can be like, yeah, because I'm having a screaming baby inside. You know, I wonder if you'd be willing to hang out with me. And then you can say yes or no. That's different than being like, you did this to me, right? Yeah, but it's hard to have that level of awareness, of course, for so many good reasons. Okay. Oh, there's still more. I've got a lot of slides with the truth. Okay. Relationships change and feelings change. Yeah. Everything's changing all the time. You can't promise people forever, but you can enjoy like the game of that, or like the, you know, the aesthetic of that, but it's not real. Efforts to own or control other people, or to control other people's feelings, are futile and painful. Yeah. I can't make you only like me. I can't make you like me more. Just can't do it. It's also a weird thing to try to do that will probably lead to hard stuff between us. Relationships based in compromising ourselves and our desires are stifling and full of resentment. At their best, our relationships should support our full development and cultivate our desires rather than treating them as threats. This is really big. We've all been told that if you really love someone, you'll compromise. You'll move to Kansas with me. You'll have a baby even though you don't want to. You'll become monogamous with me. You'll do the sex act that you don't want to do that I want to do. Whatever it is, we tell each other these things. And this idea of compromise is often very uneven, with women compromising more than men, and all the stuff we've talked about, or, you know, partners of color being forced to compromise for white partners, all those things about how our power dynamics can happen. And I really believe we should go into things not compromising. So it doesn't mean being inflexible. It means being like, can I hold on to my dignity and not be in a competition with you, and be like, this is what I really want and need. And it's possible that if we really want and need different things, that we shouldn't continue this connection this way. Or things could be a whole third way we haven't thought of, like you moved to Kansas and I don't, and we see each other once a month, or we, you know, something else, right? Like, there's so many things that could happen. But if I start by compromising, oftentimes one person will be more likely to compromise than the other because of like personality qualities, because of prior trauma and experiences. And then I'm already like on the resentment train, my life just got smaller because of my relationship. How could we have these relationships in ways that didn't make us have to get smaller? You know, I think it's something people are afraid to even ask, because the scarcity thing with a romance myth is like, oh my God, Dean, hold on to him, trap a man. Okay. Oh God, there's more. Never ends. The idea that there are scarcity of partners or one white person is harmful. Many of the needs we are encouraged to meet through romantic and sexual connections, like sexual gratification, physical affection, affirmation about our appearance, play, intellectual stimulation, feeling seen, companionship, sharing our stories, caring labor, sharing holidays, sharing meals, and cohabitation, can be met through friendships, family, and or through our relationships with ourselves. Yeah, I would just like, I think the best thing that happened to me was just being like, well, who do I want to do that with? Like really significant to me that my long-term boyfriend was not the person I wanted to bring to my dad's funeral. I wanted to bring my best friend. Or that, there's particular people I want to talk to when things are really hard at my job. It's not my boyfriend. He doesn't work that kind of job. It's like, I mean, I don't want to not talk to him about it, but you know what I mean? Like, it's like, there's knowing that there are certain people, like I want to go away with on this kind of writing retreat with these friends, like just that it's like, why would it have to be this one guy all the time? Like there's things we like to do together and there's other things that I like to do with other people. And like knowing that, and then knowing that's true for him, and not needing to have to do all these things together, some of which we do really well together, and some of which there's somebody else I like to do it with it better, and having flexibility around that. It's very anti-romantic, I think, on some level, but it's makes it so much more fun to know the person because you're just doing stuff you like to do together. And I've never want someone to like come with me to something that they don't want to come to because they have to, because they're my boyfriend or my date, or you know what I mean? Like, can I diversify my support system? And of course there's complexity in here, right? Like sometimes we have particular care things we do with people we're close to because we have different physical and mental health things happening. There's a lot there, but to the extent that it's possible, if we can have more support system and then more choosing around this, the feeling of choice really helps us reduce resentment. Okay, last few slides. I think friendship is the balm that we all need. I believe it's the most liberating relational experience in our lives. And I'm curious what you guys think are good friendship practices. I'll just say friendship is where I have been able to give and receive the most feedback that's led to my growth, where I've been willing to listen to the hard facts about how I'm, hurting people, where I've been able to practice boundaries, where I've been able to see repair after harm. Like friendship is where if dating and sex is where I've seen myself act the most sideways and my friends act the most sideways, friendship is where I've seen us show up differently. So what are some good friendship practices? Saying I love you, boundary setting, learning to genuinely apologize, radical communication, hold me accountable. I really recommend Mia Mingus's writings on apologies. I'm sure many of you found them on her blog. They're really great. Speaking the truth, saying what you mean, building in boundaries and the assumption that you come and go as you want. Yeah. Intentional check-ins. I mean, when friends celebrate their friendships, they're like, let's have a friendiversary, things like that. And I'm treating it as important as romantic relationships. Being curious about my friends, even ones I've known for years. Great. Pushing yourself to be more vulnerable than you want to. Like there's all this research about how people don't talk as deeply with their friends as we used to because our phones are constantly interrupting us. Maybe some people have read these books by Sherry Turkle. Anyway, yeah, making sure we actually have deep connection with our friends and talk about serious stuff and cry or share what's really happening, put our phones away, like let a conversation be long, let it be uncomfortable. Showing up and being there to help your friend be their best self, having them do the same. Understanding that we're continually choosing each other. Friendship is therapeutic. Touch cultivated in a friendship setting. Yeah, have people getting to have non-sexual touch, so helpful. There's a lot of research about how dangerous and harmful it is for people who only can find touch through sexuality. Hugs, regular phone dates. A lot of people I know sleepovers. When I met my current boyfriend, he kept a list of his friends in his pocket. And I think it was like, for him, it was like, he knew he was like falling in love, and that makes you kind of like lose your mind. And so I was like, it was like his little mad map was like this list of his friends. And I was like, oh, you're a keeper. You know what you're doing, not expecting our friend to literally be our therapist. Yeah. Right. Yeah. Can we have mutuality? Can we really make space for each other? Deep forgiveness and long-term friendships, doing mundane things with friends. I love doing laundry with friends. It's like my favorite. Yeah, so good. What else do I have here? More roses. How can we take care of ourselves when the romance myth is making us believe that someone else is the answer to all our problems, that we want to isolate from the world with someone, and that we're unworthy? Any thoughts on that? How can we take care of ourselves when we're starting to believe that stuff? I mean, so someone else is the answer. I find a lot of like Buddhist teachings really helpful in this idea of craving. Like, I believe that thing will make me permanently happy. If I could get that job, if I could have that body, if I could get that person to love me back, if I could have that kind of boyfriend, that is always an illusion, See a friend, slow down and check in with our inner child. Yeah. Find things that we like to do alone. Yes. Learning how to have solitude. That's really missing. Call a mom figure. Yeah, that's cool. Honor our spiritual needs and journey. Yeah. Developing a spiritual framework for most people is really helpful for many people. Separate our voice from our inner critic. And by what I mean by spiritual is like a sense that there is an unseen, a sense that there's something bigger than us. Like, I don't have to know everything. I don't have to control everything. Loving kindness, keeping a list of your favorite qualities and favorite ways in which you can center yourself. Cool. Try to do something familiar to remember who you've been, and try doing something unfamiliar to remind yourself you have future selves to come. Reach out to a community. I keep a journal of all the really loving things friends have said to me, even silly, tiny things. That's so nice. So, so nice. Yeah. I had an experience where I really was like circling the drain around a crush, feeling really insecure and stuff. And then in the midst of that, I went and like gave a talk, and I was like, whoa, I'd like completely forgotten that I'm like a person who has a community and people like have found my work useful, and that like I've been working on it for decades, and like I really like the people I meet when I go. Like I'd forgotten, I was like I had no context for myself. I was all gone. There was no prior DM. It was just like, oh, this is crush, really helpful to be like, oh no, actually there's other things about me, and they'll be there when this is over. Shut the phone off. Playlist for a future self. That's cool. Pets. Yeah. Pets are so helpful, I think, for coming back from some of these stories. Relationship to land, intimacy and relationship to the land. Yeah. I think that for a lot of people, that's a growing edge to actually cultivate that. Yeah. Really beautiful. Do all the indulgent things you never want to do in front of another person. That's fun. I love that. Yeah. There's a lot of conversations about people not having as much solitude with like cell phone and internet culture. And so people, are just never alone. Solitude being defined as when I'm not letting other people's thoughts in. So not listening to a podcast, not listening to music, but just staring out the window on the bus, or, whatever, going through the park. Like, people have less of that time without that stimulation. And some people think that it makes it harder for us to process big feelings, not having that. So can I even get any solitude back? Can I have times when I'm not receiving other people's thoughts? It might help me. Cool. Oh, the belief that someone else is bad. That's the other side of this, It's really easy to be like, it's so bad when I think I'm bad, but it's also really bad when we think other people are bad. Like, we need to work on that. The prison culture stuff that we live in is so heavy and really produces a punitive streak, in all of us, and a labeling streak. And it can really, it's really fucking up our movements super bad. And so how do we notice the tendency to think someone else is bad? Oh, and then this is my last question. How can we support our friends who are getting isolated in romantic relationships? As you all know, it doesn't help to just like judge someone and be mean. Like, that's not going to bring them back. So what can we do to support our friends who are getting isolated in romantic relationships? Have you guys tried anything that's worked? Have a cute friend date. It's really hard. Yeah, thanks for saying that, B. I struggle with this too. Sometimes it's just really hard. Care package. That's cool. Yeah. Not a lot until they're aware they need support. Yeah, that may be true. We can't rush people to have an insight that's not happening for them right then. Ask them how they want to be supported, prioritize their dignity and agency. Also, we can all be making our friendships places of honesty now, so that later when I get into that relationship, we already practice saying hard things to each other, instead of it being like the first time you ever say anything to me, it's like, Dean, I think you're getting isolated in this relationship. And I'm like, how dare you say these things about the person I love? Check in with them and see if there are things, activities they have not been prioritizing and would like to do again. Invite them to a protest. Cool. Invite them to keep doing things that they aren't doing because their partner won't do it. Yeah, if people's worlds have gotten small, continue to reach out to them and invite them to things still. Yeah, don't give up on them, because it may be going to a place where they're going to need you super bad. You don't know if that's in 6 months or 6 years, but keeping that line of communication open at all, if we can, I think is really, really worthwhile. Agree to be on a dating committee for each other while single, so that we can have a conversation during those big feelings. That's cool. Sometimes phrasing it as me needing company or love from them, because many people are more comfortable to support you than seeing themselves as needing support. Yeah, that's a really generous way to do it. That's really, really smart. If they break up, maybe not take sides. Yeah, Thanks. Encourage them to talk about their partner because sometimes it's tempting to not, because all they talk about, but it's important to show you're always a person who's open to talking about their partner. Yes, I have definitely experienced supporting people who are in isolating or violent relationships. And if they stop talking to you about it, sometimes actually that's worse for them, because now they're more isolated. So it's like, how can I keep that door open even while I'm not going to say like, yeah, that sounds great, because it doesn't sound great. No, that wouldn't be honest. A sense of spacious time, being aware of how a sense of urgency is maybe even motivating. Yeah, the need to intervene. Yeah. Letting them know they're still worthy and strong, even if they try to fail to get away. Yeah. Recently, I had a conversation with someone who had called a DV hotline because of a friend in a situation. And the person on the DV hotline told them that it often takes people 7 tries to get out of a relationship. And I think a lot of us have seen that. We have a friend who's trying to get out of something hard and then it takes a lot of tries. And so that really gave me a really nice, like, oh, like, let's have a spacious relationship to this. Like, I'm not going to give up on you in the 5th try. I'm going to keep being here and keep caring, even though I might feel like sick of this, or whatever. Remind them of the other neglected aspects of themselves and celebrate and nurture that with them. Asking them to do something that's like an activity to open them up to other things beyond the relationship. Yeah, that's so great. All right, I know that we are close to, I think that this time, this event maybe ends at between 9:30 and 9:45 East Coast time, or 6:30 and 6:45. So I want to just make a little space and people, in case people have questions, or I think it's easiest to put them in the chat because there's so many of us. Is there anything that people would like me to address in any way that I have not addressed? I'm gonna stop sharing my screen. That's yeah. Curious. I love what people are saying in the chat. So good. I'm curious to hear about the role of babies. I mean, we could have this exact same presentation about parenting, right? It's like the mythology about how people are supposed to feel about parenting, the reality of how rough it actually is in a society that's so anti-parent and so sexist. The ways in which parenting takes people away from movements because there's no support for parents. It's so much. How do you or other folks? Wait, let me. Oh, here it all comes. Okay. Yeah, I think that the main way that I believe in debunking it, while it's so centered in our culture, is just talking about it with other people. Just like talking to my friends about it, even just talking about how like weird my thinking is, or like, wow, what's the message in that song, or whatever. Is it possible to repair when the romance myth has fucked things up? I think it's possible to repair anything. I feel like as an abolitionist, I really deeply believe that we can repair all of our relationships and that we can always apologize. I have had beautiful experiences in my life. Like, I dated someone for a really long time, and for a huge portion of our relationship, they were an active alcoholic. And when they got sober, they apologized to me in ways that actually I felt heard and seen. And it was a process that took us a while to hear and see all of that. And then I didn't feel resentful or need to punish them about it anymore. I believe that stuff is possible. It doesn't usually happen because of our punitive culture and because of our shame culture, but I really believe that repair is always possible. And sometimes it takes a long time, it's like we're in it for a while. Oh, people are okay. This one, Olivia asked, do you have any suggestions how to discuss with people who are pushing the romance myth on you, how to convince people that pushing the romance equals happiness is unhealthy? I just want to say also, your dates may push it on you. It may be like if you don't want to be with me, it's because you don't love me. If you don't, like, this is really common. I think it's a values issue. It's like, it's important to share what our perspective is and be honest about how we see that stuff. And then also be like, it might not be a match, like if it's gonna feel like torture to somebody that you don't want them to be your only friend or whatever, like, don't do it. Like, I think that's what's so hard about the scarcity piece. Oh yeah, someone, Magdalena says, how to fully engage with friendships when you grew up hearing things as there's no such thing as friends. I think a lot of people grew up in family cultures like that. I think it's just practice. It's just practicing having reliable friends and being reliable, telling friends that you want to practice trust. One thing we can do, I know a lot of people in this room probably know about the love languages quiz. It's so helpful. It's like so basic, but it's so helpful, where it's like, what makes me feel loved. And there's an idea that it's like, for some people, it's words of encouragement or words of appreciation. For some people, it's physical touch. For some people, it's gifts. For some people, it's acts of service, whatever, quality time. And so finding out like what actually makes me feel loved and telling other people, telling your friends that, and then finding out what they feel makes them feel loved. Because like if you're giving them gifts every time you see them, but what they actually want is quality time, they might not feel your love. So like I think you can build trust by finding out what people like and want, and then doing it, whether or not it's your like go-to that you would have done because of how you want to be treated. Like that is very trust building. I think trust is just like, it's just practice, and that's really hard. And there's certain situations in which most of us become less trusting because of something that happened in the past. And so those are like really great to practice in, but it's really, really hard. Yeah. Yeah. I'm just reading some of, there's so many great questions here. The particular practice that has been most helpful to myself, Carlene asks, I mean, I find it really helpful to read a lot of romance self-help books, even though they are terrible. You have to like kind of hold your nose around all the heterosexuality and monogamy and whatever. But I have found them useful. And the book that I'm going to put out gives just a summary of the parts that I think are useful in them and skips the other stuff. So I hope that's helpful to people. I have found it really helpful. I found the literature of 12-step programs about sex and love very helpful. And sometimes the meetings, some of it can be really anti-sex and stuff, but it also can be a chance to just take that area of life seriously and look through what is like, do an inventory of my own behavior and my feelings and notice some patterns. Some people 12-step does not work for them. I get it. In some of those programs, there's something called bottom lines, which are like, what are things that I'm just not going to do now? Like, it's kind of like, how am I going to define my sobriety in those programs? And so it could be like, I'm going to have this kind of bedtime, or I'm not going to use these dating apps after 9 p.m., or I'm not going to use them for more than an hour a day, or I'm not going to look at this ex of mine on social media. Like whatever are the things that you need to stop doing to be more well in this area. I found that really helpful. The idea of having some bottom line behaviors that I defined and then had like an accountability buddy. When there were things that I've done that have just seemed like I'm kind of hurting myself with this, which a lot of us have those, or like maybe that's safer sex practices that you really want to, you haven't able that boundary for yourself or something like that. I found that idea really, really useful. And I've also found like individual therapy really useful, meditation. I mean, if it's out there, I've tried it, I came into this really fucked up, like so many of us because of family stuff. How movement building can perpetuate these myths and expectations collectively. Yeah, gossip, exactly. Yeah. I think talking about the stuff in our movement groups, like I'm in some groups where we have a conversation about like what is ethical in this area of life, because we're trying to get people to not sexually harass other people in the group, or we're working with youth or whatever. But that whole conversation about what's ethical can include all kinds of things like, oh, let's not gossip about each other's sex lives. Let's have a sex positive culture in this group, but not one that is dismissive of people who are not having sex, or that makes sex or romantic relationships more valuable than other relationships, but also one in which nobody's shamed for being sexual. Like just even saying that all together as a group, or like what's been hard for you in other groups around these kinds of principles, and what would have helped. I think having those conversations about group culture around the romance myth, around practices, because sex and romance are, they're happening in the whole group. Even if they're happening between two people, they're affecting dynamics that impact everybody potentially, or could, and how we all believe about them can really hurt each other. You guys are writing the best things here. Yeah, how we avoid the urge to use the romance myth as a way to bite back at people who have hurt our feelings. Like, you're just buying into the problematic romance myth. Yeah, basically anything we've talked about tonight, we could weaponize against each other. Let's not, like, it's just, yeah, it's like, also, we're all just really swimming in this soup all the time. And so we all have these feelings and ideas, and it's not about like blame or self-judgment or shame. It's just like, could I have like be an inch more aligned with my values? And could I be an inch more supportive of like the groups I'm in, having like kind relationships between people? Like, can I do that? Is jealousy motivating me right now? Is possessiveness motivating me right now? Is scarcity motivating me right now? Okay, I'm not bad. I don't have to act on it, but I could ask for support from a friend about it. I don't have to hide it, but I think the first thing has to be, I'm not bad for having that feeling. Like, you were programmed. We all were. it's like, if we start with shame, we probably won't come to like pragmatic solutions and chances to practice something new, you know? Yeah. Oh my God, there's so many things I haven't read. I'm just gonna look at a few more. Yeah. Somebody asked about like examples for repair and friendship building after a breakup or decoupling. I would just generally say that like there's so much great stuff coming out right now out of transformative justice and abolition circles about having difficult relationships, about repairing harm, about how to do conflict. There's a really great workbook recently put out by Jovita and William. What is that workbook called? I think it's called Coming Together. It's got the word together in the title. Maybe someone could put it in the chat. It's a really great workbook about managing conflict. And there's parts of it that are about between two people and parts of it that are about like in movement groups. Do you guys know Jovita, Jovida, and William, Weyam? If anyone can find that and put the link in the chat, that's great. Actually, some of my students who are here, we read that in class, maybe another link. I think that I think Miriam Kaba and others put out a recent workbook about difficult conversations or reparative conversations. There's just a lot of stuff coming out. The website transformharm.org is a place where a lot of this stuff is being collected. So I think for me, it's really helpful to like read stuff like that with another person or in a group or have a reading group with friends. I mean, obviously there's the recent book that Ijiris and Leah edited. Somebody can put that in the chat. It's a really great anthology about transformative justice. It's so funny. My mental capacities for remembering titles are not as good as they once were. But I think looking at that kind of stuff, like actually having our friend groups talk about what conflict can look like. And then, you know, if you have already had something hard with somebody, you know, I've really gotten a lot out of like going to a therapist together or a mediator or some kind of trusted person in our community, like just having a third person so we don't have the same dynamic we always have. And being really clear, like, what am I looking for in this conversation? I can't make the things never have had happen. I can't make this person guarantee to see things my way. What's a realistic thing that I could get out of this conversation? Maybe talking that through with some friends before doing it to decide if it even is the right time. Because if I'm still like, I need this person to see it my way, it may not be the right time to have the conversation, you know? I'm just gonna look at a couple more. Yeah. Okay. Somebody asked what steps we take to keep our crushes liberatory and connective rather than obsessive, disappointing, etc. I mean, I think mad mapping it. Like, am I listening to the same song over and over again and cultivating a feeling of obsession or cultivating, you know what I mean? Am I forgetting like, I love this idea, like what else is true? Like, okay, here I am in this little circle inside my mind with me obsessed with this person, maybe the other person. What else is in my life? Oh, there's an entire planet. Let's think about all the trees on the planet. Let's think about all the people I've known, all the other friendships I've had, all the other times I've had sex, whatever it is that reminds me that there is more context, because that's kind of what happens as it gets to be really narrow. Trying to remember what the purpose of the group you're in is. Why do I so deeply believe in that purpose? Can I feel my body? We are here to stop homeless sweeps, or we are here to take care of babies, or we are here to, you know, end border imperialism, or whatever. Can I connect to that when I just want to be obsessed with this person in the meeting? I think it's useful to think about for yourself what escalates crushes and what de-escalates them. I have like a recipe for de-escalating a crush in this draft of this book. Like, what do I need to, what are the thoughts I'm having that this person is going to make me permanently happier as the answer to all of my whatevers? Like, can I just firstly admit that to myself? And then what are the like sober realities that I can just put beside that? Can I give myself, like, when that thought comes in, and also, Dean, this is true. Again, I'm not bad, but you know, like, how can I, you know, just de-escalate it, you know, in the same way as I'm having a story about how this person, I mean, this happens all the time in social movement groups. I'm like, I think this person is the worst person in the world. They're so annoying, the other person in the group. I used to like them, but now I hate them. They have terrible politics. They're fucked up, whatever. How can I de-escalate that shit? Because that's so toxic for the group, right? So same thing when I've got you on the pedestal, like it's the only place to go when you got someone on that pedestal. There's going to be some kind of crash probably. And so how can I be like, okay, what's a sober assessment and like delightful? I'm really admiring this person. There's really sweet things about that. But, you know, what is the recipe? What's the spell? do I need to ask a friend to help me? Do I need to think these 3 things before bed? Do I need to not listen to these songs? Like, what do I need to not read these poems? Like, what do I need to do to not, because I think most of the time we're really giving it a lot of juice, whether or not we acknowledge that. I'm aware that it's 6:40. Laura, should I stop?
Maybe it's time for one more, but this has already
I can't
been,
hear
you've
you.
been so incredibly generous with your time. So how are you feeling? Do you have energy for one more, or are you?
Do other people hear Laura?
Can you hear me? Am I coming through?
Oh, it's maybe because I'm muted in some way.
Can you hear me now, Dean?
I hear you. Yes,
Oh,
I'm
okay.
sorry.
Not at all, but now I'm echoing. No, I was saying you've been so generous. This has been so incredible. I think we have time for one more, but only if you feel up for doing one more. You've been so generous with your time and energy. This would be incredible if this were it.
I'll look at one more. Sure. There's like so many things happening in the chat. I'm gonna
know, it's
want to read this
amazing.
all later. Okay. Oh yeah, somebody says the book Polysecure has helpful insights. That's great. Thank you. There's a lot of good books in the chat. Yeah, Principles of Relationship Anarchy are here. There's a really great zine called Linked that I read that I thought was really useful about relationship anarchy. Yeah, what conversation to have, if any, when all your radical friends are suddenly posting a ton of queer engagement pics on IG? What I would say to that is like, this is where we're like, I'm not going to judge you, and I'm here for you if and when that becomes disappointing later. Like, this is where we're just like I am like so feverishly anti-marriage. I really think people shouldn't do it. I really worry about a lot of those moves to publicly declare those kinds of love. I worry about some of the sideways things about them, and also like everyone's got to do their thing, and it's not any better or worse than anything else I'm doing. And so how to just like, I think the number one thing is like how to not judge ourselves or others. It also doesn't mean that like you have to, like, I think when we have real relationships with people or we talk about our politics, I'm not going to not say, wow, I was a little surprised to see that. That's not what we've talked about before. Like, it's, you don't want to like hold back feedback in a way that's like dishonest and disconnects, right? That it's like, how do we maintain a connection? It's non-judgmentalness, and it's like, maybe that person thinks it'd be interesting to talk about what changed for them. Like maybe they want to talk about that, or instead of like, or also like the idea that everyone's supposed to just go along with and support anything the Romance Myth supports is also not fair to you. If that's not feeling celebratory to you, if you feel a little bit like I'm losing, I thought I had a community that believed in this with me, and everyone's leaving me behind and doing this thing that's culturally normative. That's real. It's been really important to me to have other friends who were into not getting married and not having kids, because almost everybody I know did that. And I was like, oh, I guess I'll just be over here, not doing that, and so it's important to find that support. But I do think we have to be careful about it's like the point, we need to maintain connection. Like the connection can have boundaries, it can have feedback, but how do we not go to shaming, and know that everyone in this culture is very likely to feel shamed. We all are, just because of the way the culture is punitive. And so yeah, I think it's like, and ideally we build strong enough friendships that we can say to each other like, hey, that seems a little odd. And also know when it's not time to say that, or if I say it and it wasn't time, that you could be like, I forgive you, Dean, for saying that, and I can make an honest apology about it. Really glad to have been here with all of you. This was super fun. Thank you so much for hosting this to everybody at the Poetry Project.
Thank you so much, Dean. This was such a gift of an evening. I've been looking forward to it for so long. As I said, it's funny. I have to admit, after we booked it, I started inviting everyone I've ever met. Basically, I was like, listen, lovingly, you all need to hear this. And this was so, so wonderful. Thank you all so much for being here. I would love to invite you back. We have another event tomorrow at the Poetry Project called Homegoing: Languages Capacity to Bridge. I'm putting a link in the chat. I think it might be of interest to all. It's going to be really beautiful, and part of the focus will be on Black feminist friendship, which I feel like connects to so much of what we've explored tonight. So thank you again for being here. Take good care. Maybe we'll put a song on and we can stay saying goodnight and our appreciations in the chat. And I hope to see you all again very soon. And thank you again so much, Dean. This was such a beautiful, beautiful, wonderful night. Thank you.